I still remember that Thanksgiving as if it were branded into my chest with fire. Even now, years later. When autumn leaves begin to scatter across the sidewalks and the air carries that cold sharpness that tells you winter is waiting just around the corner. My heart tightens and my mind drifts back to that evening. I am a mother, 66 years old at the time, living in the quiet suburbs of Ohio. My life has been simple, not perfect, but I built it with my own 2 hands. I raised a son, my only child, after my husband left when he was barely 8 years old. It was just the 2 of us against the world, and I poured everything into him, my time, my sacrifices, my dreams. I worked extra shifts at the diner, saved every penny I could, and when he got into college, I cried tears of pride knowing I had done something right. He was my pride, my reason for waking up in the morning, my anchor when loneliness threatened to drown me. People said I was too attached, too protective, but they didn't know what it was like to give up everything for one person and still feel it was worth it. I told myself that no matter what life took from me, it couldn't take away the bond between a mother and her son. But bonds can fray. Love can twist into something unrecognizable. And sometimes, betrayal doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the one face you swore you could always trust. That Thanksgiving was supposed to be special. I had been planning it for weeks. I pulled out my late mother's recipe box and dusted it off, determined to recreate every dish the way she used to. I wanted my son, Michael, and his wife, Claire, to feel at home in my house, to remember that family traditions mattered. I basted the turkey every hour, mashed the potatoes with extra cream, baked 2 pies pumpkin and pecan just to make sure everyone had their favorite. I wore my best dress, brushed out my graying hair, and even set the table with the old china I rarely touched. The house smelled of roasted herbs and warm bread. I told myself this was the year we'd feel like a family again, no matter the distance that marriage sometimes puts between a mother and her grown son. But the hours ticked by, and the silence in the house grew heavier. My phone buzzed around 5 o'clock. It was Michael. I answered with a smile already tugging at my lips, but the moment I heard his voice, something inside me dropped. "Hey, Mom," he said, his tone hesitant, like he knew he was about to hurt me. "Listen, Claire's family is in town, and they've been wanting to see us. We're going out to dinner with them. I'm so sorry, but we won't make it over tonight. Save me some leftovers." "Okay, love you." The line clicked off before I could even respond. I stood there in my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the feast I had poured my soul into. The turkey sat golden brown, the pies still cooling, the candles flickering in expectation of laughter that would never come. I felt the tears sting before I even realized I was crying. Leftovers, that's all I was to him. I sat at the table alone, the weight of silence pressing down until it was almost unbearable. I tried to eat, but every bite turned to ash in my mouth. I wrapped up the food carefully, as if maybe tomorrow would change something. But deep inside, a seed of something dark was planted that night. Resentment, hurt, and the beginning of a realization I had tried to deny for years I wasn't his priority anymore. In the days that followed, I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being dramatic. People have obligations. Marriages are about compromise. Maybe next year would be different. But the memory lingered like a bruise that refused to heal. I replayed it over and over, his voice, the ease with which he chose them over me, as though I were a safe option, a backup plan. the one who would always be there no matter how much he neglected me. And then came Christmas. Another table, another meal I prepared with hope, stitched into every dish. And once again, another call, another excuse, another evening alone. Only this time, there were no apologies, just a casual tone that said, "We're doing Christmas morning with Claire's parents. We'll swing by later if we can." They never did. I started to notice the pattern. It wasn't just the holidays. Birthdays passed with nothing more than a quick phone call. Weeks turned into months without visits, and when I called him, there was always a rush in his voice, a polite but distant tone, as though I were intruding on a life he no longer wanted me in. At first, I blamed Claire. It was easier that way. She was the outsider, the one who had stolen my son. But as time went on, I realized the harder truth Michael allowed it. He chose it, and every time he did, the little boy I once held in my arms seemed to slip further away, replaced by a man who didn't seem to need me at all. One night, after yet another lonely holiday, I found myself rummaging through an old box of keepsakes. His baby blanket, his first report card, photos of him smiling with gaps in his teeth. I clutched them to my chest and sobbed until my throat ached. And then, like lightning, a thought struck me. Maybe I had given too much. Maybe my love had been my downfall. Maybe in making him my entire world, I had taught him that I would always be there no matter how he discarded me. But people reach their limits, even mothers, especially mothers. The turning point came the following year. It was another Thanksgiving, and I told myself I wouldn't cook this time. I didn't want to set myself up for disappointment. But out of habit, out of some desperate hope, I found myself back in that kitchen, the smell of roasting turkey filling the house. My heart betrayed my mind, clinging to the possibility that maybe this year he would walk through the door. But instead, I found out through a neighbor's Facebook post that Michael and Claire had hosted a lavish dinner at their house with her family. They hadn't even bothered to call me. I was erased, invisible. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't just about the turkey or the holidays. It was about a lifetime of sacrifice, of giving every part of myself to a son who now acted as though I were an afterthought. I thought of the nights I worked double shifts while he slept peacefully. I thought of the shoes I went without so he could have new ones. I thought of the loneliness I endured so he could chase his dreams. And in that moment, I realized he had betrayed me not with malice, but with indifference. And sometimes, indifference cuts deeper than hatred ever could. I made a decision then. I would no longer beg for scraps of his time or affection. I would no longer be the leftover at his table. If he wanted to push me out of his life, then he would learn what it meant to live without the woman who built that life for him. But as with all stories, the path to revenge or maybe justice is never simple, because in trying to let go, I uncovered secrets I had never expected, secrets that changed everything I thought I knew about my son, his marriage, and even myself. It began with a letter. I had gone to drop off a small package at Michael's house one afternoon. Something trivial I had picked up that made me think of him. He wasn't home, but the mailbox was stuffed, and among the envelopes, one caught my eye. It wasn't addressed to me, of course, but the handwriting looked eerily familiar. My late husband's. My heart froze. It couldn't be. He had been gone for nearly 20 years. I slid the envelope out and turned it over in my hands. No stamp, no address, just Michael's name scrawled in that same looping script I had once known so well. Against every better judgment, I slipped it into my bag. That night, I opened it. My hands trembled. My breath caught in my throat. And what I read inside shattered the fragile image I still clung to of my family. It was a confession. A letter written by my husband before he died. One he had apparently hidden away. He admitted to an affair, to fathering another child, one he had kept secret from me and from Michael. A child who, as I would come to learn, had grown up much closer to Michael than I ever realized. And suddenly, the distance, the neglect, the choices he made, all of it began to make sense. My son hadn't abandoned me for his wife's family. He had been building ties with a sibling I never knew existed. A sibling he had grown to trust, to love, to prioritize while I, the woman who had raised him, was left in the shadows. The betrayal cut deeper than I can explain. Not only had my husband deceived me, but my son had known, had chosen loyalty to this hidden family over the woman who gave him everything. The rage that burned inside me was unlike anything I had ever felt. And in that rage, I made a vow I would uncover every secret, expose every lie, and make them all face the truth they had buried at my expense. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my chair by the window, the letter trembling in my hands as if it might dissolve into dust if I loosened my grip. Outside, snow began to fall, quiet and soft, as though the world wanted to soothe me. But inside, I was a storm. How long had Michael known? Had he kept this secret since he was a boy? Did he resent me for not telling him? Even though I hadn't known myself, my mind was a tangle of questions, each sharper than the last. The next morning, I called him. My voice was steady, though my chest ached. "Michael," I said, "I need to see you. It's important." He hesitated. I could hear it in his silence. Then, finally, he said, "Sure, Mom, tomorrow." When he arrived, I laid the letter on the table between us. His face drained of color the moment his eyes fell on it. That was all the confirmation I needed. "You knew," I whispered, "all this time. You knew." He didn't deny it. Instead, he lowered his head like a boy caught sneaking out after curfew. "I found out in college," he admitted. "Dad's old friend slipped one of the letters to me. I didn't know how to tell you." "Not tell me," my voice cracked, rising in pitch. "Michael, I lived my whole life believing it was just you and me, that we were all each other had, and you let me sit here in the dark while you built another family behind my back." His jaw tightened. "It wasn't like that." "Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you, but when I met her, my sister, it felt like something I was missing clicked into place. She's my blood too. I couldn't just walk away." The room spun. My chest felt hollow, as though he'd scooped out everything I'd ever given him and handed it to someone else. "And what about me?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Am I just leftovers to you too?" He reached across the table, but I pulled my hand back. His touch burned. That day, I realized something vital. Betrayal isn't always a knife in the back. Sometimes, it's the slow erosion of trust, the steady choosing of someone else over you until one day you look around and realize you've been erased. I thought I had cried every tear I could shed. But that night, the flood came again, not just for the secret, but for every holiday, every lonely meal, every unanswered phone call. I wept for the years I could never reclaim, for the woman who gave up her life to raise a boy who now saw her as a shadow. But grief only carried me so far. Eventually, it gave way to something sharper: resolve. If there was another child, another sibling in this tangled mess, then I deserved to know the truth. All of it. Her name was Emily. That's what Michael told me when I pressed. She was a year younger than him, living just a few towns over, a nurse, married, with 2 little boys. My grandsons I never knew I had. The injustice of it nearly consumed me. For years, I had dreamed of grandchildren, prayed for the sound of little feet running through my house, only to be told gently, apologetically, that Michael and Claire weren't ready. And now I learned there were children carrying my blood, laughing in someone else's kitchen while I sat alone with cold turkey and memories. I demanded to meet her. Michael refused. He said it would be too messy, that it might cause problems. That's when I understood I wasn't just being left out. I was being deliberately shut out, and that was something I couldn't forgive. I began my own search. It took weeks of digging, a few favors from old friends, but eventually I found her. The first time I saw her, it was through the window of her house. She was in the kitchen, her hair tied back, her laughter echoing as she wiped flour from her little boy's cheek. They looked so much like Michael at that age that my knees went weak. I pressed a hand to the glass of my car window and whispered to no one. Those should have been mine to hold. I drove away before she could notice me, but the image stayed with me, searing itself into my memory. It would have been easier to walk away, to accept the scraps I had been given and carry on. But something inside me, some combination of love, rage, and wounded pride, refused. I had been silent too long. If they thought they could erase me from the story of my own family, they were wrong. The opportunity came unexpectedly. Emily hosted a holiday party in mid-December. I knew because Michael and Claire posted photos online, smiling wide, glasses raised in toasts I was never invited to. My heart clenched at the sight, but it also steeled me. I couldn't let them celebrate while I sat in silence. So I showed up. I wore my best coat, brushed my hair until it shone, and walked up her driveway with my head held high. The sounds of laughter and music spilled into the cold night air as I knocked on the door. When Emily opened it, confusion flickered across her face. She didn't know who I was. Not yet. "Hello," I said softly. "My name is Margaret. I'm Michael's mother." The silence that followed was deafening. Behind her, I saw Michael freeze, his glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the floor. "Mom," he hissed, stepping forward, panic in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" "I came to meet my family," I said simply. Emily's face paled, then flushed with realization. She looked between us, her hand trembling on the doorknob. For a moment, the world seemed to hang in balance, and then she stepped aside. "Come in." The air inside was thick with tension. Conversations faltered. Eyes followed me as I entered, and I felt like a ghost walking through their celebration. But I didn't falter. Not this time. We sat in the living room, the children playing on the rug as if unaware of the storm brewing above their heads. Emily finally broke the silence. "You're my father's wife," she said slowly, her voice trembling. "I was," I corrected. "But more importantly, I'm your brother's mother, and whether you like it or not, that makes us family." Tears welled in her eyes. She looked so much like him, like the man who had deceived us both, that it hurt to meet her gaze. Michael tried to intervene, but I silenced him with a look sharper than any blade. "No more lies," I said. "Not tonight." And then, for the first time, the truths we had all buried spilled out into the open. The affair, the letters, the years of secrecy. Each word felt like a wound torn open. But with every confession, the air grew clearer, like a storm finally breaking. Emily wept openly. She confessed that she had grown up knowing she was unwanted, a secret child her father never fully claimed. She said she envied Michael, believing he had everything: love, stability, a mother who stayed. And I, sitting there with my broken heart, realized how twisted the truth was. Because while she had envied him, I had envied the family she now shared with him. Two women, both betrayed by the same man, both aching for what they had been denied. In that moment, my anger softened into something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. We were both victims of the same betrayal, just in different ways. But Michael was no victim. He had chosen this path. Chosen to hide the truth from me. Chosen to replace me at his table with people I had never known. And for that, I couldn't let him walk free of consequence. The night ended in tears and raised voices. I left before the children's bedtime, my chest heavy, but my spine unbroken. Driving home, I realized this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. If Michael thought he could push me aside, he was wrong. I wasn't just his mother. I was the woman who had built him, who had given everything for him, and I would make sure he remembered that. He would learn, perhaps too late, that you cannot erase blood, and you cannot betray a mother without the weight of it coming back to crush you. And so began my quiet revenge. Not the kind with shouting or slammed doors, but the kind that lingers in silence. In truth, exposed. In the weight of guilt pressing down until it becomes unbearable. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about forcing them to see what they've destroyed in you. The days after that night were heavy with silence. Michael didn't call me, and I didn't call him. We were two people orbiting the same truth, but refusing to look at it directly. Afraid of the gravity it held. But the silence wasn't empty. It was sharp. Like shards of glass scattered across the floor. Waiting for one misstep to draw blood. I carried the weight of that confrontation like a stone in my chest. Part of me felt vindicated. I had forced the truth out of hiding. Emily knew who I was now. The lies my husband spun all those years ago had finally been cracked open. Yet, another part of me felt hollow. Because what had it brought me? Did Michael's arms come around me, apologizing, vowing never to choose others over me again? No, if anything. He seemed more distant, more guarded, as though he resented me for daring to take a seat at a table I was excluded from. I began to think more deeply about revenge. Not the kind of revenge you see in movies, where someone storms into a room with shouting and accusations. My revenge had to be quieter, sharper, more lasting. It had to be a truth he could never escape, a reminder that no matter how far he ran, no matter who he chose, I was the mother he betrayed, and mothers have long memories. I started small. I stopped answering his calls immediately, when he did eventually reach out, days later. My tone was cool, polite, but stripped of warmth. The kind of tone you use with a stranger at the bank. I could hear the unease in his voice, the cracks forming as he realized my love, the love that had always been unconditional, was no longer guaranteed. I had always been the one to go to him, to make the effort, to smooth the distance. Now, I did nothing. I sat in my quiet house, reading, gardening, attending church, pretending I didn't care whether he showed up or not. The truth was, I cared desperately. But sometimes the most powerful weapon is pretending you don't. And then, slowly, cracks began to widen in his perfect little world. One Sunday afternoon, I received an unexpected knock on my door. When I opened it, I found Emily standing there. Her eyes were red, her expression uncertain. She clutched a plate of cookies in her hands like a peace offering. "I needed to see you," she said softly. I hesitated. A part of me wanted to slam the door. But another part, the part that had always longed for family, stepped aside. "Come in," I said. We sat in the kitchen, the same room where I had once waited for Michael to come home for Thanksgiving, the same table where I had cried over leftovers. Only this time, there was another woman sitting across from me, one who shared my pain more than my son ever could. "I'm sorry," Emily said, her voice breaking, "for everything, for not knowing about you, for being part of this mess." I studied her face. So young compared to mine, yet already carrying the burden of betrayal. "You're not the one who should apologize," I said. She wiped her tears. I don't understand him. Michael, he's been so angry since that night. He says you're trying to ruin his life, but I think—" She paused, her voice trembling. "I think he's afraid you'll take me away from him, that you'll replace me somehow." Her words struck me like a blade. Replace her, as if I hadn't already been replaced, as if I were the threat when I was the one cast aside. I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "I don't want to replace anyone, but I won't be erased either. I gave Michael everything, and now I want what I'm owed, the truth, the place that was stolen from me." She nodded slowly, as though she understood more than Michael ever could. "Then, let me help you." It was in that moment I realized fate had handed me an unlikely ally, the daughter of my husband's betrayal. The sister my son chose over me was now standing on my side. Not because she wanted to, but because the truth had broken her too. Together, we began to unravel the story. Emily told me things Michael never would. How their father had promised her he'd leave her something. But after his death, she received nothing. How Michael had taken it upon himself to protect her, but in doing so, had become almost possessive, controlling. How he often spoke of me with bitterness, claiming I had smothered him, that I had chained him with guilt his whole life. The words burned like acid in my veins. Smothered him, guilt. All I had ever done was give. And this was how he repaid me, by turning my love into something ugly in his mind. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. One evening, Emily came to me with trembling hands, holding a folder of documents. "I shouldn't be showing you this," she whispered, "but you deserve to know." Inside were bank statements, transactions that didn't make sense. Money moving from Michael's accounts to ones under Claire's family's name. Large sums, hidden in plain sight. As I scanned the pages, a sick realization crawled over me. They weren't just excluding me from their lives, they were bleeding me dry. Because some of those funds had originally come from accounts I helped establish for him, back when he was in school. Accounts where I'd deposited my life savings to give him a head start. My stomach churned. Betrayal had many faces, but this one was the cruelest. He hadn't just left me behind, he had taken from me, knowingly, silently, while smiling in my face. And suddenly, my revenge took on a new form. It wasn't just about cold shoulders or withheld affection anymore. It was about exposing him, showing everyone, including his perfect wife and her family, what kind of man he really was. I started documenting everything, every bank statement, every letter, every memory that painted the true picture of who Michael had become. I wasn't reckless. I knew if I went at him head on, he would deny it, twist the story until I was the villain. No. My revenge had to be patient, precise, like setting a trap and waiting for the prey to step into it on his own. The chance came at Easter. Claire's family was hosting another big dinner, the kind I was never invited to. But this time, Emily called me in secret. "Come," she said. "You need to be here. They need to hear the truth." I hesitated. Walking into that house again felt like walking into enemy territory. But something inside me, the fire that had been lit that Thanksgiving years ago, told me this was the moment I had been waiting for. So I went. The house was buzzing with chatter, glasses clinking, children laughing. When I stepped inside, the room went still. Claire's smile froze. Michael's face hardened, and I could feel the tension ripple through the air. I didn't flinch. I walked straight to the center of the room, set down the folder of documents I had carried with me, and said in a clear, unwavering voice, "It's time everyone knew the truth." Gasps followed as papers were pulled out, as eyes scanned numbers that spoke louder than words ever could. Claire's father demanded answers. Emily added her voice, backing up every fact I laid out. And Michael, my son, my only child, stood there pale and trembling, his perfect little world crumbling around him. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was devastating, because the truth, once revealed, cannot be buried again. Michael's eyes met mine across the room, filled with fury and something else, fear. He opened his mouth to speak, to lash out, but I stopped him with a single sentence. "You chose them over me, and now they see who you really are." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. When I left that night, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. For the first time in years. I wasn't clutching scraps, waiting for his affection, begging for a place at his table. I had carved out my own place, forced him to face the damage he had done. And yet, as I drove home, tears blurred my vision, because revenge, even when justified, doesn't heal the wound. It only ensures the one who cut you bleeds too. But maybe that was enough. In the days after that Easter, the phone rang constantly. Neighbors, church friends, even old co-workers called me after hearing whispers of the confrontation. Apparently, when a family cracks open in public, everyone wants to watch the pieces scatter. But I didn't care about gossip. What I cared about was the silence that stretched between me and Michael for the first time in my life. I didn't rush to break that silence. I let it breathe, let it grow. He had always relied on me to patch things up, to swallow my hurt for the sake of peace. But not this time. Let him feel the emptiness he left behind. Let him sit with the wreckage of his own choices. One evening, a week after Easter, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find him standing there. His face looked drawn, his eyes rimmed red, and for a fleeting second, I saw the little boy I once held after nightmares. But then I remembered the man who had looked me in the eye and called my love a burden, the son who had cast me aside for secrets and convenience. "Mom," he said softly, "can we talk?" I stepped aside, not warmly, but not coldly either, just enough. We sat at the table, my table, the one he hadn't eaten at in years. He glanced at the walls, the photographs that had never changed, the life he had abandoned. For once. He looked small in this house, not towering over me as he had grown to in adulthood. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice cracking. "I just wanted to protect everyone. I didn't want you and Emily to hate each other. I thought if I kept things separate, it would be easier." "Easier for who?" I asked quietly. He swallowed hard. "For me." The honesty of it cut through me like a blade. All those years, all that sacrifice, and in the end, it had always been about him, his comfort, his peace, his control. "You've always assumed I'd be here," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You've always believed you could take from me, neglect me, betray me, and I would still be waiting with open arms. But I'm not waiting anymore. Michael, I'm done." He flinched for the first time. I think he realized I meant it. "I'm your mother," I continued. "That will never change. But I won't be your safety net anymore. If you want me in your life, you'll have to prove I matter. Not with scraps, not with leftovers, but with the respect I've earned." Tears welled in his eyes. "I don't know if I can undo what I've done." "Then that's your burden to carry," I said. We sat in silence after that, the weight of years pressing down on us. Finally, he stood and left without another word. In the weeks that followed, the distance remained, but it wasn't the same kind of distance as before. This time, he knew it was his to mend, not mine, and I, for once, didn't feel the urge to chase after him. Instead, I found myself spending more time with Emily. Strange, isn't it the daughter of my husband's betrayal? The sister my son clung to had become my companion. We didn't become best friends overnight. Pain leaves scars that don't heal easily, but we found solace in our shared wounds. She would bring her boys over to my house, and I'd watch them play in the yard, their laughter ringing out like a balm I hadn't known I needed. One afternoon, as I held the youngest on my lap, Emily looked at me and whispered, "They should have always known you. I'm sorry they didn't sooner." I pressed my lips to the boy's soft hair and said, "Better late than never." And I meant it, because while revenge had given me satisfaction, these children gave me something far more powerful: hope. I won't lie and say the story ended neatly. It didn't. Michael and I never returned to the closeness we once shared. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend like a broken bone. It leaves a weakness, a reminder. But we found a new balance. He called more often. He brought Claire by occasionally, though the warmth between us was gone. He tried, in small ways, to stitch together what he had torn, and I let him. Not because I had forgiven him completely, but because carrying bitterness forever is its own kind of poison. Every Thanksgiving since, I've cooked, not for him, not waiting by the door like a fool, but for whoever wants to join me. Sometimes Emily and her boys, sometimes neighbors, sometimes just me. But I cook because it's mine, my tradition, my table, my choice. And when I set the table now, I don't leave an empty chair for Michael. I set the chairs for those who show up, who choose me as much as I choose them. I still remember that first Thanksgiving alone. The sting of being left with nothing but leftovers. It broke me. But it also remade me. It taught me that love must go both ways. That sacrifice without respect is just self-destruction. It showed me that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destruction, it's survival. It's standing tall when they expect you to crumble. To this day, when I walk past a bakery window and see pumpkin pies, I smile. Not because of the pain of that night, but because of the strength I found in the ruins of it. And if you're listening to my story right now, if you've ever felt like someone you loved pushed you aside, left you with scraps while giving the best of themselves to others, I want you to hear me clearly. You are worth more than leftovers. Don't beg for a place at a table that doesn't honor you. Build your own table and fill it with people who do. Because in the end, that's what I learned. Betrayal can wound you, but it cannot define you. Revenge can satisfy you, but it cannot heal you. Healing comes when you stop waiting for someone else to choose you and start choosing yourself. So this is my truth. Raw and imperfect. Laid bare before you. I am a mother who gave everything, who was betrayed, who clawed her way back to dignity. And if my story has reached you, if it stirred something in your chest, then maybe it was worth every tear, every lonely meal, every bitter holiday. Thank you for walking through it with me. If this story touched you, please like it, share it with someone who might need the reminder, subscribe for more of these true stories, and leave me a comment. I want to hear your voice too. Because stories like this shouldn't be carried alone.